I woke to the sound of alarms at 2 in the morning. Not the smoke detector, not the security system, the piercing shriek of my own energy monitor. It was the sound I'd designed to tell me something was wrong, something big. My name is Evan Cole. I'm a solar engineer. My life is built on order, precision, and logic. Circuits either work or they don't. Systems are either balanced or broken. And that night, the system I'd built around my home was screaming that it was broken. On my dresser, the tablet screen glowed red. A graph climbed upward like a skyscraper, 48 amps, maximum draw. But my car wasn't plugged in. It was fully charged, sitting silent in the garage, which meant one thing. Someone else was using my charger. I pulled back the curtain. The motion sensor light bathed my driveway in sterile white. There it was, my charger's heavy-duty cable, snaking across the concrete and into a silver Tesla Model 3. And there she stood, as calm as if she were watering her flowers in the morning sun. Karen Dunn, president of the HOA. Silk robe, slippers, phone in hand. My power, feeding her car. Karen Dunn, the queen of petty rules. She fined neighbors for trash cans left out 10 minutes too long. She cited lawns for being a quarter-inch too tall. And yet her own rose bushes climbed into Tommy's yard unchecked, her rules never applying to her. That night, she wasn't enforcing anything. She was stealing. I stepped into the cold night air, bare feet on concrete, anger sharpening with each breath. The hum of electricity was constant. She looked up at me without shame, without even surprise. Her smile was thin and smug, the kind you give when you think you can't be touched. She tapped my charger with her hand, called it a community feature, and told me she was just topping up. Community feature. As if the hardware I'd bought, the weekends I'd spent wiring, the solar panels feeding it, all of it somehow belonged to her kingdom because she declared it so. That wasn't logic. That was madness. By the time her car rolled away, I knew the fight had only just begun. To her, boundaries weren't walls. They were challenges. People like Karen don't stop when you say no. They escalate. And if she thought my home was her personal utility station, she had just declared war. That morning, I sat in my workshop, schematics scattered across the workbench. Sarah brought me coffee, concern etched on her face. She asked if this was really necessary. I told her the truth. When someone like Karen decides your property is theirs, you don't argue. You build defenses. That's when I started designing the upgrades, layered defenses no one could bypass. A steel lockbox to cage the cable, a hidden breaker to cut power from the shadows, an RFID system that would only respond to me or Sarah. And finally, a black box, a silent witness, logging every attempt, every surge, every unauthorized draw. I wasn't building a charger anymore. I was building a fortress, and if she came back, and I knew she would, the lesson was going to be expensive. Because sometimes, the only way to deal with a bully is to let them walk right into the trap you've set. This was just the beginning. The night she stole my power was the night she made her first mistake. But it wouldn't be her last, and before this was over, her arrogance would set fire to more than just neighborhood rules. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because this story only gets crazier from here. And trust me, you'll want to see what happens when an HOA president thinks she's above the laws of physics. The morning after Karen's midnight stunt, my house didn't feel like my sanctuary anymore. It felt compromised, invaded. Every time I glanced at the charger mounted on the garage wall, I could see her smug face in the glow of the driveway light. The memory was burned in, like a bad watermark across something I'd worked too hard to make perfect. So, I did what I knew best. I turned frustration into design, logic into defense. The first layer was simple. A physical barrier. A lockbox built of hardened steel designed to swallow the charging handle whole and clamp shut with a weatherproof combinations lock. Cheap locks could be cut or pried open. This wasn't cheap. It was industrial grade, the kind of equipment utilities used for outdoor panels. Once mounted, the heavy shell would turn my charger's connector into a vault door, visible, obvious, and defiant. But one lock wasn't enough. Karen wasn't the type to see a padlock and walk away. No, she would see it as a challenge, a dare to be beaten. That's why I needed redundancy. Invisible redundancy. I spent the afternoon running a new electrical line through the attic, splicing it into the charger's circuit and feeding it through a hidden breaker. Tucked behind an unmarked utility box, the breaker acted like a trapdoor in the system. With a flick, I could kill power to the charger completely, making the entire unit nothing but a dead piece of plastic. Even if she pried open the lockbox, even if she forced the cable free, she'd get nothing. 2 layers down. But I wasn't finished. The third upgrade was where the engineer in me found satisfaction. A layer not of steel or hidden switches, but of intelligence. RFID, radio frequency identification. The same keycard tech that opens secure offices and hotel rooms. I ordered a module, wired it into the charger's enable circuit, and programmed it to recognize only 2 tags. One embedded in a card I kept in my wallet, and one hidden in a sticker on Sarah's phone. Without one of those tags present, the charger wouldn't even hum. To Karen, it would look like a lifeless wall ornament. To me, it was the equivalent of turning the lock and handing the key only to myself. But there was a final layer. The black box. My silent witness. See, a lock stops theft, but it doesn't prove theft. And I knew Karen well enough to see the next play before she made it. If she failed, she'd twist the story, find a way to blame me, maybe even spin it into an HOA violation. That's how people like her operated. They didn't retreat. They rewrote reality. So I built the recorder. A weatherproof housing bolted beside the charger, with a microcontroller inside wired to sensors on the line. Every volt, every amp, every surge would be logged to an SD card in 1-second intervals, time-stamped with precision. Unauthorized access attempts would ping my phone. Dangerous surges would flip a contactor and shut the system down in milliseconds. A watchdog for my grid, objective and silent. I stood back when it was finished, looking at my layered defense with a mix of pride and dread. The lockbox was the wall, the breaker the moat, the RFID the guard at the gate, and the recorder the notary who would write everything down. It was over-engineered, perhaps, but so was I. Sarah walked into the garage as I was cleaning my tools. She studied the fortress I'd built. Her voice was gentle, almost tired. Is all this really necessary, Evan? It was. Because this wasn't about watts or bills. It was about boundaries. And boundaries meant nothing to someone like Karen, unless they were enforced. For a few days, the system sat idle. The lock gleamed in the sunlight, untouched. Karen drove past the house more than once, her gaze lingering, her mouth set in a tight, sour line. She didn't say a word at the mailbox. She didn't come knocking on the door. But her silence wasn't peace. It was the silence of calculation. I knew it. Sarah knew it. Everyone who had dealt with Karen knew it. Then one night, the system proved its worth. It was just after midnight when my phone buzzed. Not a loud alarm, just a short, sharp alert. I unlocked it and read the message. Unauthorized access attempt detected. My chest tightened. I moved to the window, careful not to make a sound. The driveway was lit again, the sterile glow of the motion sensor spreading shadows across the concrete. And there she was, Karen Dunn. Not in a silk robe this time, but dressed in dark clothing like she was on some covert mission. She wasn't holding my cable. She couldn't. It was locked tight in its shell. Instead, in her hand, I saw something worse. A cheap, off-brand charging adapter. The kind sold in shady online shops. The kind with no certification, no safety checks, no protections. She was aiming for the holiday light outlet. The little 120-volt plug I kept under the eaves for Christmas decorations. It wasn't part of the charger's circuit. It wasn't protected by my system. To her, it must have looked like a loophole, a victory waiting to be claimed. She jammed the adapter into her Tesla's port. I could see her struggling, twisting it in, forcing it. She glanced up at my house with a look of satisfaction. the kind that said she thought she'd beaten me. But electricity doesn't bend to ego. It doesn't care about HOA presidents or silk robes. It follows rules. And the adapter she held in her hand had no business trying to mediate between a high voltage car and a basic wall outlet. Knew what was about to happen. The smile was still on her face when the first spark jumped. It wasn't an explosion. It was a violent conversation between bad wiring and raw current. A sizzle, sharp and angry, followed by a blinding blue-white flash. Plastic shrieked as it melted. The smell of burning insulation cut through the night air. Then came the smoke, thick, black, acrid. Her car coughed fire. Karen screamed, stumbling back, eyes wide with panic. The cheap adapter had fused into a molten lump, flames licking at the side of her Tesla. And that's where I stepped in. Because as much as I wanted her to learn the hard way, I wasn't about to let the neighborhood erupt in a lithium fire. In the garage, my hand found the extinguisher I'd hung for exactly this reason. A Class C designed for electrical blazes. I yanked it free, sprinted outside, and in one cold burst of white powder, smothered the flames. Smoke hissed, plastic fizzled, and silence returned. Her Tesla was scarred. Black streaks marred the silver paint. The charging port melted into a grotesque wound. Her arrogance had cost her thousands in damage. But when I looked at her face, I didn't see gratitude. I didn't see shame. I saw calculation, and in the quiet that followed, I realized the war had only just begun. Because people like Karen don't stop when their toys catch fire. They double down. They find someone to blame, and in her eyes, that person was me. The fire was out, the smoke fading into the night, but the damage was done. Her silver Tesla sat in the driveway, scarred and silent. The adapter fused into its side like a grotesque wound. The acrid smell of burnt plastic clung to the air, a reminder of just how close it had come to becoming something much worse. I lowered the extinguisher, chest heaving, adrenaline still coursing through me. My focus had been on the fire, on making sure it didn't spread. But when I looked at Karen, expecting at least a shred of recognition, some acknowledgement that her recklessness had caused this, I saw something else. Her eyes locked on me, wide and unblinking, and then narrowed into a glare. Not fear, not remorse, fury. You did this. Her expression seemed to scream, and before I could say a word, she turned her fury into sound. Her voice cut through the night, shrill and piercing, accusing me of sabotage. She said I'd set a trap, that my charger was faulty, that I'd ruined her car on purpose. Every word was venom, each accusation louder than the last. I stared at her in disbelief. Moments ago, she had been fumbling with a cheap, uncertified adapter on my property. I had just saved her car from being reduced to a husk, and now she was trying to rewrite the story, to make me the villain. That's when her eyes darted to the gray box mounted beside my charger, the black box, the silent witness I'd built. Its tiny red LED blinked, proof that it had recorded every attempt, every draw, every anomaly. Proof that I wasn't lying. She lunged. Her hands clawed at the box, nails prying at the plastic latch. I shouted, dropping the extinguisher with a metallic clang, but she was fast, fueled by desperation. The cover snapped open. Her fingers wrapped around the SD card, yanking it free. That little square of plastic was my evidence, my defense, my truth. And in an instant, it was clenched in her fist. I moved toward her, demanding it back. But she backed away, eyes wild, clutching the card like a trophy. "This is evidence," she shrieked. "Evidence of your negligence." And before I could react, she turned and ran. The chase was on. She tore across my lawn, slippers slapping against the grass, robe flapping behind her like a cape of madness. I followed, fueled by the cold fury of knowing my reputation, my safety. Even my freedom could hinge on the data she had just stolen. That SD card wasn't just plastic, it was the truth, and without it, her lies could stick. She cut between houses, crashing through hedges, stumbling but never stopping. I was faster, closing the distance, my breath heavy but steady. Neighbors stirred. Lights flicked on, doors opened. Tommy, always the night owl, stepped onto his porch as we barreled past. "What's going on?" he shouted. "She stole my evidence," I barked back, not slowing my pace. Karen screamed louder, her voice breaking into theatrical sobs. "Help! He's attacking me!" Her cries carried through the night, echoing off the walls of sleeping homes. She wasn't just running, she was already weaving her narrative, building her shield of victimhood, even as she clutched the truth in her hand. Then came the lights. Red and blue strobes cut through the darkness, painting the manicured lawns in chaos. A sheriff's cruiser skidded to a stop at the end of the street, headlights washing over us. The deputy stepped out, one hand on his holster, eyes sharp and cautious. Karen changed instantly. Gone was the frantic sprint, the wild-eyed thief. She dropped into a crouch, hands up, sobbing with exaggerated relief. "Officer, thank God! He tried to burn my car and now he's chasing me." Her performance was flawless, honed by years of twisting rules and bending narratives. To an outsider, it looked damning. Her trembling form, her tears, me standing there with clenched fists and the heat of the chase still on my face. But I knew something she didn't. She wasn't the only one who could play the evidence game. I raised my hands slowly, forcing calm into my voice. I told the deputy my name, pointed back at my house, and explained what had happened. I told him about the charger, the unauthorized adapter, the fire, the extinguisher, and the black box. I told him Karen had pried it open and stolen the SD card. The very card clenched in her fist. The deputy's eyes flicked to her hand. She tried to hide it, shoving it toward her robe pocket, but it was too late. He ordered her to open it. Slowly, with all the reluctance of a cornered animal, she unfurled her fingers. There, resting in her palm, was my SD card. The deputy bagged it immediately, tagging it as evidence. His voice was steady, professional, but I could see it in his eyes. He'd dealt with this kind of scene before. He'd seen the theatrics, the accusations, the lies. He knew. We all walked back to my driveway, the deputy shining his flashlight over the scene. The melted adapter fused to her car, the extinguisher dust coating the ground, the lockbox untouched, the monitor box hanging open. The story I'd told him matched the evidence perfectly. Neighbors trickled out, drawn by the commotion. Tommy spoke up, saying he'd seen her running, clutching something. Mrs. Gable from across the street offered something better, her porch camera. It had recorded the whole thing. Karen's face drained of color at that revelation. Her advantage, her ability to twist the story into whatever she wanted, was slipping away. For the first time, she looked small. The deputy assured me the SD card and the footage would be reviewed, and that the fire marshal would be called in to examine the damage to her car. He promised a full investigation. Karen didn't say another word that night. She stood by her smoking, scarred Tesla, arms wrapped tightly around herself, fury simmering beneath the cracks in her composure. When the cruiser finally pulled away, evidence secured, neighbors dispersing, I knew this wasn't the end. It was the start of something bigger. She wasn't going to stop. She'd already tried theft. She'd tried sabotage. She'd tried framing me. The next step would be escalation. Louder, bolder, more public. But she'd made a mistake. She thought I was just a neighbor with a charger. She didn't realize I was an engineer with systems, with records, with allies. And if she wanted a war, she was about to find out I'd built more than a fortress. I'd built a trap she couldn't escape. The HOA meeting was only days away. And in that sterile room, under fluorescent lights, her kingdom would finally face the truth. The night of the fire ended with evidence bagged, neighbors whispering, and Karen standing alone in her driveway, staring at the blackened scar on her Tesla, as if it were someone else's fault. But for me, it was just the beginning. The next morning, the weight of it all hit me. Not the smoke, not the damage. I'd handled those. What hit me was the realization that Karen wasn't going to stop. She had already tried theft, deception, and sabotage. Now she'd been caught red-handed with evidence in her fist, but she'd still walked away free. I knew exactly what she'd do. Twist the story, bend the rules, try to turn her title as HOA president into a shield. So I got to work. Not on circuits, but on a case. The fire marshal arrived first, clipboard in hand, tools at the ready. He examined the charred adapter still fused into the side of Karen's Tesla. He didn't need long. His report was short, blunt, and devastating to her. Catastrophic failure of an uncertified third-party charging adapter. Cause: improper equipment, not the homeowner's electrical system. His notes were clear. My wiring was compliant. My charger safe. Her device the culprit. I tucked a copy of that report into a folder. Exhibit A, but I wasn't done. I knew the power of cameras. Not just my black box. Not just my garage system, but the neighborhood itself. In a place where mailboxes had to be uniform and lawns measured by rulers, everyone had cameras. So I went door to door. Tommy handed over his doorbell cam footage, which captured Karen's shrieking accusations after the fire. Mrs. Gable across the street gave me her porch. Cam recording. Crystal clear images of Karen sneaking onto my property, fumbling with the adapter, sparks flying, smoke rising. Other neighbors chimed in with fragments. Her running, me chasing, her clutching the SD card. Piece by piece, I built a timeline. A 2-minute video stitched together like a prosecutor's dream. No narration, no commentary. Just Karen, exposed by her own actions from half a dozen angles. The kind of footage you couldn't argue with, because the truth was undeniable when it played on loop. Sarah sat beside me as I edited. Her hand rested on mine more than once, steadying me when the anger threatened to break through. She reminded me this wasn't just about revenge. It was about protection, about standing up to someone who'd made a career of bending people until they broke. By the time I was done, I had Exhibit B, and then the phone rang. It was the deputy from that night. Calm, professional, his voice carried the weight of confirmation. The fire marshal's report backed me. The SD card data corroborated my story perfectly. Karen had attempted unauthorized access multiple times before the fire, proof she had been targeting my charger. And while the card contained no direct record of the blaze, she'd used a different outlet. The log showed her intent. The deputy hinted at charges: trespassing, theft of utilities, even filing a false police report. But it wasn't just about law anymore. In HOA neighborhoods, perception was power, and Karen still wore the crown. That's when the knock came. Not Karen, not the sheriff. Something worse, at least for her. A local reporter, Jessica Wu, Channel 7, on your side. She introduced herself with practiced professionalism, cameraman in tow. She'd heard whispers, gotten a copy of the preliminary police report, and smelled a story. An HOA president, a fire, accusations of sabotage. It was the kind of neighborhood drama that audiences devoured. At first, I hesitated. The last thing I wanted was to become a spectacle. But then I thought of all the people Karen had fined, humiliated, controlled. I thought of the way she had tried to twist the fire into my fault, the way she'd sobbed theatrically at the deputy's feet. If she wanted to fight in public, then the truth would meet her there. So I invited Jessica in. I started in the garage, showing her the permits, the schematics, the city approvals, every bolt, every panel up to code. I walked her through the layered defenses, the lockbox, the hidden breaker, the RFID system. I showed her the black box recorder, explained how it logged every attempt. I handed her a copy of the fire marshal's report. Her eyebrows rose as she read. So, the official cause wasn't your equipment? She asked, camera rolling. Correct, I said. It was her uncertified adapter. The report calls it a catastrophic failure. Then I played the video. 2 minutes of damning clarity. Karen sneaking, sparking, screaming, stealing. Jessica didn't say a word until it ended. Wow, She finally whispered, her professional mask cracking for just a moment. That's incredibly clear, the segment aired that evening. Calm narration, clear evidence, my story laid out piece by piece. Not a rant, not a spectacle, just facts. Permits, reports, video, proof. And at the center, Karen Dunn, HOA president, exposed as a liar and a reckless neighbor. The phones lit up. Messages poured in from neighbors who had seen the broadcast. "We're with you, Evan." Finally, someone stood up to her. About time she got caught. The tide had shifted. For the first time in years, the fear she ruled with was cracking. People weren't whispering about her fines anymore. They were laughing at her downfall. Karen, of course, stayed silent. She didn't answer the reporters' questions. She slammed her door in their faces. But silence wasn't surrender. It was plotting. I knew it. And I knew where she would try to fight next. The HOA meeting. Because in her mind, that clubhouse wasn't just a conference room. It was her throne room. The place where she still wore the title of president, where she still believed she could control the narrative. But this time, she wouldn't be facing whispers or complaints. She would be facing evidence, neighbors united, and a projector screen. The war wasn't over. The fire had been the spark. The broadcast had been the wind. Now the blaze was spreading, and Karen was about to be consumed by the very community she thought she ruled. The HOA meeting was set for Thursday, standing room only, and I planned to walk in not just with proof, but with the support of an entire neighborhood. For once, it wouldn't be Karen writing the rules. It would be everyone else, watching her kingdom collapse. Thursday night, the community clubhouse, usually a half-empty room of bored faces and polite nods, had transformed into a packed arena. Every chair was filled, neighbors lining the walls, voices buzzing with the anticipation of something more than landscaping budgets and pool maintenance. They weren't here for HOA business. They were here for justice. Sarah and I walked in with Tommy at my side. In my bag was the folder, permits, the fire marshal's report, the deputy's notes, and my laptop, ready to project the edited video across the sterile white wall behind the board's table. At the center of that table sat Karen Dunn. She wore her authority like armor, back stiff, hands folded, eyes locked forward. But her face betrayed her, pale skin, clenched jaw, lips pressed so tight they were almost bloodless. The other board members flanked her, looking uneasy, shifting in their seats like men caught standing too close to a crumbling wall. The meeting opened with ceremony, the kind Karen always relished. The pledge, the minutes, the roll call. Her voice was flat, rushing through formalities, desperate to move past them. She was trying to keep control, but control had already slipped. When she reached the line item, new business, she tried to skip ahead. "If there are no additional topics, we'll proceed to—" "I have new business." My voice cut through the room. Every eye turned to me. Karen froze, her gavel mid-air. "You're not on the agenda, Mr. Cole," she snapped, trying to cling to authority. "I'm putting myself on it," I said. "I'm a homeowner, and I have a presentation for the board and the community." A murmur rippled through the crowd. One of the board members, George, cleared his throat. "Karen, I think we should let him speak." The others nodded. They had all seen the news segment. They knew the story. To silence me now would look like collusion. Karen's lips trembled. Finally, she dropped the gavel onto the table with a sharp crack. "5 minutes? I'll need 2, I said. I set the laptop on the table, connected the projector, and aimed it at the wall. The room dimmed as the screen came alive, my desktop background replaced by the frozen frame of the video timeline. I didn't say a word, I just pressed play. The footage spoke louder than I ever could. Karen sneaking across my driveway, fumbling with the adapter. The blue-white flash of the arc. The smoke. The tiny flames. Her shrieking accusations captured on Tommy's doorbell camera. The footage of her prying open my monitor box, yanking the SD card, sprinting into the night. My pursuit. Her sobbing performance when the deputy arrived. Every gasp from the audience was a nail in her coffin. Murmurs turned to whispers. Whispers turned to pointed glares. By the time the 2 minutes ended, the silence in the room was suffocating. I turned off the projector and let the silence hang. Then I spoke. This isn't about electricity. It isn't about dollars or watts. It's about abuse of power. Karen Dunn, the president of this HOA, trespassed onto my property, stole from me, damaged her own vehicle with unsafe equipment, and then tried to frame me for it. She filed a false report. She lied to all of you. I turned to the board. You entrusted her with authority, with dues, with rules, with leadership. What she's shown you is not leadership. It's recklessness, arrogance, and dishonesty. I am calling for a vote of no confidence. Effective immediately, Karen Dunn must be removed from this board. The words landed like thunder. For a moment, no one moved. Then Tommy stood. I second the motion. George cleared his throat again, his voice grim. Board members, all in favor? Hands rose, one by one, then all together. Every board member except Karen. Then, like a wave, hands went up across the room. A forest of neighbors voting, silent but united. Karen sat frozen, her hands trembling on the table. Her mouth opened, but no words came. What defense could she offer? The video had stripped her bare. The fire marshal's report, the deputy's notes, the cameras. The truth, the motion passes, George declared. His voice was steady, final. Effective immediately, Karen Dunn is removed as president of this homeowners association. The room erupted. Applause, cheers, the release of years of quiet resentment. Neighbors shook my hand, clapped my back, whispered thank yous. For once, the community wasn't afraid of her. They were free of her. Karen rose from her chair, trembling with rage, her eyes blazing as they locked on me. For years, she had ruled through fear, through fines and threats. Now, stripped of her title, she was just another neighbor. This isn't over, she hissed, shoving her papers into a bag. But her voice was drowned out by the sound of her own subjects celebrating her fall. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the projector screen rattled. And just like that, the queen was gone. But the battle wasn't entirely over. The board still had business to settle. Restitution. I handed George an invoice, a certified Tesla shop's estimate for the damage to my outlet, plus the cost of the extinguisher I'd used to save her car. Reasonable, modest. He glanced at it and nodded. The HOA will cover this. Consider it compensation for what you endured. Then I handed him one more paper. A temporary restraining order, signed by a judge that very morning. Karen Dunn was forbidden from contacting me or Sarah, forbidden from coming within 100 yards of my property. Gasps rippled through the crowd again. That was the final seal. Not only had she been dethroned, but she was now legally bound to keep her distance. When the meeting adjourned, the mood was electric. Neighbors clustered around me, their words a chorus of relief. For years they had endured her petty tyranny. Tonight they had watched her crown taken, her throne pulled from beneath her. Sarah slipped her hand into mine, her eyes shimmering with tears. You did it, she whispered. I shook my head. We did it. All of us, but deep down, I knew the fight wasn't just about me. It was about proving that no matter how entitled someone thought they were, the truth couldn't be buried under lies. And no crown could protect someone from their own arrogance. Karen Dunn had ruled like a queen. Tonight she left like a criminal in denial. And for the first time in a long time, peace returned to our neighborhood. The clubhouse had emptied, the echoes of applause still hanging in the sterile room when Sarah and I finally stepped outside. The night air was cool, quiet, a stark contrast to the storm that had just torn through the neighborhood. For the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't dared to hope for. Peace. Karen Dunn was no longer the president of the HOA. Her throne had been pulled from beneath her, her crown stripped away, not by me alone, but by the weight of the community she had ruled with fines and fear. But peace wasn't immediate. The fallout was just beginning. The very next morning, the HOA board issued an official notice to all homeowners. It was short, clipped, but unmistakably final. Effective immediately, Karen Dunn has been removed from her position as HOA president and barred from board activity. Interim leadership will be appointed until elections are held. It was the kind of sterile corporate language that carried the weight of justice without emotion. The restraining order was equally unambiguous. Karen could no longer approach my home, my family, or my property. 100 yards of enforced distance. For a woman who had once believed every inch of the neighborhood was her kingdom, the boundary was poetic. But Karen didn't fade quietly. She tried for a short time to fight back. She sent letters to neighbors, scrawled accusations about sabotage, conspiracies, and lies. She filed a complaint with the city about my solar installation, claiming it was unsafe. Inspectors came, checked my wiring, my permits, my panels. They left shaking their heads. Everything was perfect, every bolt tight, every connection clean. Her complaint dissolved like smoke in the wind. The fire marshal's final report arrived the same week. The words were damning. Cause of incident: catastrophic failure of uncertified charging adapter. Property damage: self-inflicted. Homeowner equipment: compliant and safe. That piece of paper was the nail in the coffin. And then came the news. Channel 7 ran a follow-up segment, short but brutal. They reported Karen's removal from the HOA, the fire marshal's findings, and the restraining order. They even interviewed neighbors who spoke freely now that the Queen had fallen. Stories poured out about basketball hoops fined, trash cans cited, wind chimes condemned. It was a flood of grievances that had been bottled up for years, unleashed now that people realized the reign of fear was over. Karen's reputation collapsed faster than her Tesla's charging port. By the end of the month, her car was gone, towed to a shop where it sat for weeks, waiting on expensive repairs. Her driveway, once immaculate, grew cluttered. The roses she'd pruned obsessively wilted, unwatered. She stopped appearing at the community mailbox. She became a ghost in the neighborhood she once ruled. For me, life slowly returned to normal. The charger remained in its fortress of steel, RFID and sensors, though it was never tested again. The black box kept logging faithfully, but the graphs were flat lines of ordinary use. Sarah and I walked the neighborhood in the evenings, no longer bracing for confrontation. Neighbors waved more often. Some stopped to talk, to thank me, not just for standing up to Karen, but for proving that her power was an illusion, one that crumbled the moment someone refused to bend. The community, once tense and divided, felt lighter, free. It wasn't just a victory for me. It was a shift in the culture of the whole street. Months later, elections were held. A new board was chosen. This time, people who genuinely wanted to maintain the neighborhood, not rule it. Rules were still there, but they were applied fairly. Trash cans still had to be put away. Lawns still had to be trimmed. But the enforcement wasn't personal. It was practical, reasonable. Karen sold her house not long after. Rumor had it she moved 2 towns over, into a condo where there was no HOA. No power to wield, no subjects to rule. Just 4 walls, a roof, and the silence of her own making. As for me, I kept building. That's what engineers do. The charger remained fortified, the house powered by clean energy, the systems humming in quiet perfection. But I also built something less tangible. Trust with my neighbors, peace in my own home, and proof that even the most entitled person could be brought down when truth and evidence were stacked against them. I still think about that night sometimes. The sparks, the smoke, the smell of burning plastic, how close it came to something catastrophic. If I hadn't been ready, if I hadn't prepared, Karen's arrogance could have burned more than just her car. It could have taken the whole street. Instead, it burned her crown. And if there's one lesson in all this, it's that boundaries matter. Whether it's property lines, personal rights, or the invisible line between truth and lies, cross them and consequences follow. Karen thought she was above boundaries. She learned the hard way that she wasn't above the laws of physics, and she wasn't above the will of a neighborhood united. So, if you've stayed with me through this story, Thank you. And if you've ever dealt with someone who thought they owned the world just because they had a title or a little power, you know how sweet it feels when the truth finally brings them down. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this aren't rare. They happen in neighborhoods all over the country. And the next time someone thinks they can take what isn't theirs, maybe they'll think twice when they remember what happened here. Because in the end, all Karen Dunn really managed to do was set fire to her own crown